Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Lessons Learned. On today's podcast, we talk with Alan Hopkins, Matt Strack, and Jared Emfield. All three Jiu-Jitsu black belts who own Jiu-Jitsu schools. Such a fun conversation. It's really fun to dive deep into the decades of learning and experience that these individuals have and learn more about the sport of Jiu-Jitsu and the psychology and the application of Jiu-Jitsu. Really appreciate these guys chatting, and I hope you guys enjoy the episode. Today's episode is brought to you by D.a.T sauce. What happens when you take a true Cajun from South Louisiana and combine that with a passion for the spice of life? You get Louisiana's newest and freshest, bold taste of flavor, better known as D.a.T sauce. It's great on just about everything. Go to datsauce.com. That's DAT-SAUCE.com. Check it out. It's amazing. And D.a.T sauce.
Behaviors.
All right. Now I think we're there.
All right.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you guys taking some time and chatting. Have you guys ever done a podcast before?
Nope. First time.
All right.
Couple.
You have? Cool.
Couple. Yeah.
All right.
I've done one or two.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It'll be out on all the platforms, so you guys can tell all your friends. So I like to research people out a little bit and just kind of know a lot about them. But I didn't with you guys because I wanted to just have the good conversation. So we can kind of just round robin it a little bit and just chat. I would love to dive definitely into jiu-jitsu because who better to dive into jiu-jitsu with than you guys? Maybe some good stories that you have from the past, and then also just as much as you can using jiu-jitsu to teach listeners life lessons.
Awesome.
So, where are you from, Matt?
I'm originally from just outside of Chicago, Woodstock, Illinois. Grew up there. Started doing jiu-jitsu in about 97. Met Peter Sauer shortly thereafter. And then had a chance to go to Utah, do a test for my blue belt, and saw a whole group of people out there that have been under Pedro for a while, and was like, man, this is where I need to go.
Yeah.
So figured out how to get out there and moved out to Utah.
And is it about that time that you guys met?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, because you were in Utah at the time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. He was running the academy there.
And so back in the day, you had to travel pretty far to test for belts?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, living in Illinois, had to travel across the country.
Yeah.
You know.
And why did you choose Utah?
Pedro was there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Pedro Sauer, came from Brazil, obviously with the Gracies, with that first movement, and was in California. And then, students were coming there and were asking for the Gracies. It was a Gracie Academy.
Yeah.
And so he was a black belt, just, there if they needed him, whatever. And then he had an opportunity to come out to Utah to teach through the Chuck Norris Association.
Okay.
And I think realized there was no jiu-jitsu there.
Yeah.
And there was an opportunity. So of all places, he ended up there.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
What drew you out to Utah?
Same thing.
Same.
Yeah, I did. I took my first class in 1991 with Grandmaster Hoyer and Gracie, and at that time, they just had basically 3 places in the U.S. to train, and he said you could come to L.A. My brother Hickson has a school across town. I have my academy with Hoyce, and we have a guy in Utah, and it took me a couple months, and I basically packed up and moved there.
Yeah.
So
And how long were you guys in Utah?
I was there 12 years.
12 years.
I was there only 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what did you do there? Because you ran the academy, and then Matt, you.
Man, I started off as a plumbing apprentice for a little while, and detailed cars for a little while, worked for Radio Shack, Best Buy, just,
Yeah.
did whatever I could, to survive so that I could take classes.
Yeah.
There was a good period when I moved out there. He teased me about it all the time that my dad had co-signed for a credit card, and I had like a $14,000 limit. I'm 23 years old. I got a $14,000 limit, and I didn't get a job, for a little while, and I was there for a couple of weeks or whatever, and Alan and the other guys would go golfing on Fridays, and hey, you want to go golfing? Sure, yeah, I'll go golfing with you guys. I don't have a job yet, have a little credit, and every week when we go golfing, he'd ask me, he'd say, hey, Strack, you get a job yet? You looking for a job? And I'm, oh, next week I'll look. And this went on for a while, for several months, until I was out of credit and out of money, and had to get a job.
Then life hit you.
Yeah. But I traveled to California and competed in jiu-jitsu. I took as many lessons as I could during those first couple months when I didn't have a job.
Yeah.
And then found jobs that allowed me to train.
Yeah.
Years later, my parents didn't even realize that was the reason I was out there. I had gotten accepted to the University of Utah. Okay. And I never went.
Yeah.
I never showed up for orientation even the first time,
Jiu-jitsu college.
Well, yeah. I was like, I need to get a job, I got to make some money or whatever. And they were like, you're not going to go? You got accepted there. And I kept on telling that story over and over, like, okay, I'm going to go back to school soon, and it was one of our friends. I mean, maybe it was like 4 or 5 years into me being there, telling the story. We all go out, hanging out, and be like, yeah, I'm going to go back to school. And he said, why? You're already doing what you want to do. Like, just complete your education and do it,
Yeah.
And it was kind of the first time I thought like that. And I was like, man, I guess he's right,
Yeah. Yeah, education comes in many forms.
Yeah.
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 My wife and I have talked about it, and I would never take a degree away from anyone. It's amazing, go and do it. And if you have a career path, you're going to. But if we were hiring for a generic job and there was like a bachelor's degree versus a black belt in jiu-jitsu, probably going to hire the black belt. So, which actually, I don't want to derail this too much. And I know you guys are you're good guys. You don't want to toot your horn, but I think it's important for people to realize what a jiu-jitsu black belt is. I mean, that's a big feat. Can one of you guys kind of tell us what that entails and what that takes for someone to become a black belt?
It's all you.
Go ahead.
I think there's a perception of what a black belt is, and then there's the work that you do to get there. You know, and I think those two things are very, very different. When you perceive a black belt when you first start doing jiu-jitsu, it's like watching a wizard or something. You're like, how is this possible that this person can, defend every attack and counter and do it without breaking a sweat? And you think, I'm going to be like that someday, and so you're working towards that, right? You're thinking like, okay, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, and it's like, okay, maybe when I get my brown belt, I'll be like that. And then you get to be a black belt and you're like, oh, it's still just me with all of the experience that I have. And that person that I was, in awe of, I'm still in awe of, like, wow, they're still that far ahead of me. So it becomes something greater than just that skill. It's the process, it's the sacrifice that, to get there. Like for me, a black belt is somebody who's sacrificed, who it hasn't always been easy to be there, to learn, that you have to do something like that for 10 years straight. Like you got to be there for 10 years straight. People don't want to do that. People don't want to do anything for 10 years. They want the quickest. It's still not fast enough, right? Yeah. I just saw something the other day that Starbucks is not fast enough. They now are making something easier, some serving size smaller so they can do it faster. It's like, really? Yeah. That's the problem. That Starbucks isn't fast. So I think that mentality, especially here in the States, is just, that's not how you gain skills, and, 10 years in when I received my black belt, I was proud of the work I put in, but I by no means was overly proud of who I was at that point. It's like, wow, I have a lot of work to do to get to where my instructor is. It doesn't seem like I'm catching on him at all.
Yeah. Which maybe that's one of the life principles that I've enjoyed about jiu-jitsu so far. And you mentioned it today in the seminar. You said it, maybe 3-4 years, you're like, hey, I know some stuff. But now 30 years, you're like, oh, I don't know anything. Or you do. You just have such a great knowledge of it, but there's that much more. So the more you know that you don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was there for Matt's black belt test. I was holding the camera. I got quite a bit of it. And I think that same day I got my purple belt, I think, but it might have been a little bit later than that. But I remember having a conversation with him right after he was awarded that and just said, how does that feel? Because to me, he was that titan, right? That jiu-jitsu god, that was choking me. I would drive 4 hours to get choked by him for an hour and then turn around and come back. But I remember what he said was, well, I'm just excited to start learning some jiu-jitsu. That's after 10 years of dedication and living there. And so I think it really does, become bigger than just that pursuit of black belt. And it never fits right when you put a belt on. It always feels like you're an imposter of some kind. Yeah. You're just not ready for it. But it keeps you humble for sure.
Well, those might be the people that are ready for it, right? Maybe if you feel like you're ready, maybe you're not. But just a thought. I'm pretty much as low of a white belt as you get. So what drew you to jiu-jitsu, Alan?
Oh, that's a good question. I can't really tell you.
Yeah.
I was always fascinated with martial arts. Like when I was a kid, the Kung Fu series was on, and I thought it was very cool that the guy was super tough, but he was always the nicest guy. And that always appealed to me, to be like, you could be the toughest guy, but you can still be, the nicest guy. And so I was always interested in any kind of martial arts training, and we didn't really have much of that. But when I was in high school, I was doing some kempo with a guy that had just moved there. And one day, and I live 20 miles south of Dodge City, Kansas. And so one day the guy, he tells me, hey, there's going to be a jiu-jitsu demonstration in the mall on Saturday. So we went, and it was great. It was Japanese jiu-jitsu, and it was awesome. And we just, man, that was really cool, and then we left or whatever. And about a week later, the guy comes knocking on my door early in the morning before school, and he says, hey, remember that jiu-jitsu guy? He's over at the grocery store stocking the cigarettes, right? And so he was like a regional cigarette guy for, I can't remember, was it Kent or something like that. So he was basically the display guy.
Yeah.
The display up. So we go over to the store, and he saw us coming in, and like, I don't know, I guess he felt us like, it's like, what do these guys want? And we kind of walked over there, and I said, hey, you did that jiu-jitsu demo? He's like, yeah. And I said, man, would you do one at our school? And he said, yeah, sure. Gave us his card. And my dad was the principal. So I asked my dad, hey, can this guy do a demonstration like on a Friday or something? And I think he was like, yeah, sure. Which I think he regretted that later, because that was kind of it for me.
Yeah.
After that demo, and then I started to drive up there. Had my license, so I started driving and going to the class, and I pretty much that's what I've been doing.
I think that's awesome. So your dad regretted it, but you, it shows how impressionable kids are, but also how something with this much impact can then take a kid and put them into a position where you've been able to impact thousands and thousands of people from it.
Yeah, and some of them in a good way.
Yeah. As long as it was a few.
Yeah.
Jared, when did you meet these guys?
So I had moved down to go to graduate school in Provo at BYU in 2000, and I knew what Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was. I knew who Pedro Sauer was, and I eagerly wanted to get down there. And so I'd done whatever Jiu-Jitsu or Judo I could do in the meantime, which wasn't much. And I, like Alan, had done a lot of Kempo. So I went down there and I showed up at the Pedro Sauer Academy, and the first partner that Master Sauer gave to me was Milda Chabonis. And she had just gotten her blue belt. And she was probably, I don't know, I'm guessing 17 or 18. She was pretty small and pretty young. Anyway, I was a little frustrated because I was 25. I was hitting the weights. I was felt like I was in great shape, had a couple black belts and in other styles, and thought I knew what I was doing. And she just sat for an hour and a half or 2 hours and just tied me in knots, choked me over and over. And the best part was, instead of mocking me, she would just nicely pat me on the shoulder after every tap and just say, no, you're doing fine. You know, keep smiling, don't feel bad. And that made it worse. That's like rubbing salt in the wound. And so I remember going home. There was a moment there where I just thought, okay, I've got two choices. I never tell anybody what just happened, or I need to learn this, because if she can do that, and I wasn't, punching her, but I was trying to destroy her. I wasn't being friendly. I was absolutely trying to choke her out and crush her, and it just wasn't happening. So anyway, that just had this transformative effect on me. It was every bit as good and awesome as I'd heard it could be. So I started training. And I was in grad school, and so really busy. And so most weeks I could only train on Thursdays. So I would hit the morning, the noon, and the night classes if possible, as much as I could. And that was really hard to progress, you know. So anyway, but about 2003, I finished up grad school. And Master Sauer was getting more and more busy, traveling around and teaching and everything. And so I just started asking, you know, who can I trust? Who can I learn from? I started asking friends that had trained at the Pedro Sauer Academy and everything else. And this name, Matt Strack, kept coming up. You know, he's the guy you need to go to. Excuse me. You know, somebody you can learn a ton from. And so when I went down there, I immediately introduced myself to him, and I started, when I started getting really serious about my training, driving down on Wednesdays. I would go down each Wednesday and train, if possible, the day class and the night class. And that's really when I met him. Now, I'd been kind of in the same circles, so I knew who both of these guys were, but I really hadn't, they were just those brown belts, right, that were on the other side of the room that you someday wanted to be like. I really didn't know him very personally, but that's when I started to get to know Matt. And I knew who Alan was for years before I had the courage to talk to him, say hi, and introduce myself. So we'd never rolled.
He seems pretty scary. So.
Yeah. And he moved away, when did you leave?
I left in November 2004.
Okay, so that's right. Like, I had just started making that drive probably 3-4 months before that. Yeah. And I didn't get to know Alan really well, other than just knowing him from a distance until Matt and I had trained for quite a bit, and then you know, through Matt, got to know Alan a ton.
Okay. Alan, what made you decide to leave Utah?
Well, I had. Well, let me step back just a minute.
Yeah.
When I was doing that training in Dodge City with that group, and after I graduated high school, at some point, I was living in Dodge City, and I was training there at that school, and my instructor left me in charge of the program, and which I never really liked the idea of that. I didn't really want to be the instructor. I wanted to be a student. So I was looking for basically an instructor, I guess, and I had an opportunity. I didn't have much money, but I was young and I could travel, and you know, I wasn't very responsible. So I just, anywhere there was somebody doing a seminar, I would just drive there, you know, sometimes fly. And I was just kind of looking for somebody that I wanted to train with. And I had it narrowed down to a couple of different people. And then I found out about this Horry and Gracie seminar that was in North Glen, Colorado, outside of Denver. And I had a student named Mike Williamson, and I said, hey, let's, you know, he was usually my you know, road traveling buddy. So I said, let's go. We went, And back then it was a 10-hour seminar. It's 5 hours Saturday, 5 hours Sunday. And so we went to that, and after about the first hour, I just decided that was what I was going to do.
Yeah.
I forgot about all the other choices that I thought I was going to make, and I asked Horian, I said, where, I know you have brothers and other schools, where are they at? And he said, well, I have, myself and Hoyce in L.A. and my brother Hickson across town, and I forgot, Helson was in Hawaii at that time. And he said, and then we have Pedro Sauer, who's in Utah. And so I got kind of, I was pretty naive about a lot of things. I didn't even know where Utah was. So I was looking at the map, and I said, oh, it's right there. I'm going to go there first.
It's 5 inches away on the map.
Exactly,
Yeah.
3. So I said, I think that will, suit me better. I'd been to L.A. once. I had no desire to go there.
Yeah.
I came from a town of about 600-700 people. So I had no desire to move to, a big city. And I figured Utah was about as small of a big city as I could, or Salt Lake City or Provo. So when I first planned to move there, I had never had any intentions of doing jiu-jitsu for a living. I was just going to go there and do it, train. And I always thought I would have another job, to support it. But after I got there and was training with Master Sauer for a while, it didn't take me long to figure out, like, wow, this guy, he has a family and everything he needs, and he makes that money from jiu-jitsu. So from that point on, I was like, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And so when I got my black belt, I had already, for a couple years, I had kind of been looking on the map of where there was already jiu-jitsu people. And there was none in Mississippi. So I had been there a couple times to visit and do some seminars. And so after I got my black belt, I think I stayed in Utah maybe, 7-8 months. I think maybe another 8 months. And then I moved to Mississippi and, kind of established my school there, and one in Florida, one in Alabama. And
Cool. And so that's
Louisiana.
like your school, and you affiliate that, correct? Like you affiliate it out to other
Yes.
people?
Yeah.
Cool.
I had several. I didn't really plan to do that, but once I got there, people were reaching out to me from those places and like,
Yeah.
hey, we have no jiu-jitsu either, and we'd like to, have a school under you or whatever. And so we started like that.
It's really cool. Well, and that's fun. You have more reach that way. You can have your own students, but then you can also have students of your
Yes.
teachers. That's awesome. That kind of influence that you can give. It's really cool. How did you start Soma?
That's a good question. I eventually, after I got my black belt in 2006, my brother that I was really close with, he was back in Illinois. He was a high school history teacher. He got married, and they had their first child, their son. And so in 2007, I went home when he was born. I went back and I met him. And in the 7 years I was gone, I wasn't homesick for Illinois. Kind of like Alan, I really liked the culture of Utah. I liked the big city, but small, close-knit communities.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really want to return to Chicago. And my brother actually lived in the city of Chicago. We grew up in a north suburb. But after I met my nephew, I decided I want to move back. So at that point, I was a store manager for Best Buy, had a pretty good day job, and then was running the academy. I had taken over Alan's job when he left and was running the school for Master Sauer. And so I quit my job like within a couple weeks of coming back after meeting my nephew, and told actually Master Sauer had moved to Virginia at that point, and me and two other guys had bought the academy from him and started Unified Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay.
So that was the first academy that I co-owned, and then just like out of the blue, I got a job offer from the guy who I had started jiu-jitsu with in Illinois, Jeff Curran, who had been a UFC fighter, WEC, fought championship match in that against Uriah Faber, just pretty well known. But that's the guy I started under out in Illinois, and he just out of the blue offered me a job running the jiu-jitsu program at his school, because he was busy. He was busy doing his fight career. So it just worked out. I sold my share in Unified and moved back to Illinois. But unfortunately, good for them, bad for me. Within about 6 months of me being home, being back in Illinois, my brother and his wife took jobs at Miami University in Ohio. They became college professors. Yeah. So they moved off. And I really found that I was kind of depressed. Although I was doing jiu-jitsu full time, instructing was what I wanted to do. The reason that I moved back had moved away. Yeah. So I spoke with them about kind of following them to Ohio, and jokingly said, if you guys move again, I'll get it. I won't follow you anymore.
One more try.
I could do it one more try. I moved down there and started from the beginning again, just started over. No job, no school, and there was a Taekwondo school in that town, and I talked to the owners there and just began my first school. And about that time, I started reading a lot of books on, instructing jiu-jitsu and people in the past who had done jiu-jitsu. And one of the big names that I had come into contact with was a guy named Moshe Feldenkrais, who basically had studied jiu-jitsu at the turn of the century. He was a Jewish guy that lived in France, and he had started the first jiu-jitsu school outside of the Kodokan in Europe. He was like instrumental in starting jiu-jitsu outside of it. Still wasn't being called judo at that point. It was still being called jiu-jitsu. And then later in life, he's just like an amazing. You can't even believe the stuff that this guy has done in his life. Helped Israel build their missile defense system, which was a huge part of Israel surviving there, and then is part of Krav Maga starting off. One of his students starts Krav Maga. He begins a form of physical therapy, the Feldenkrais method, which basically takes the techniques of jiu-jitsu and applies them to healing people's movement disorders, and looking at things through a microscope lens of little techniques, little things from the ground up. So taking people who have, they're walking, they don't have the ability to walk because of maybe some growth issues or whatever, or some sort of illness or whatever that's caused that, but taking them from the ground and teaching them how to do the same thing from the ground and then getting them back up. And just becoming fascinating with this guy and his work. And he has jiu-jitsu books. He's written jiu-jitsu books. And then he goes on to write these therapy books that are based on jiu-jitsu. And about the same time, I decided to go back to college, go back to school, kind of finish the work that I had begun when I moved to Utah. And so all these things are kind of coming together. This kinesiology, this human movement idea. And I think it was in one of his books, he talks about the body as soma, that this is this thing distinct from the mind distinct from, just from everything else. And, and that the whole idea of maturing the body, that humans don't reach full maturity anymore. And you hear people nowadays talking about that. You hear about, Joe Rogan brings that up on his podcast about how, we were meant to be, hunter-gatherers, and that we matured much differently then. And now we have all these instincts, but we have nothing to do with them. So that part never reaches maturity, and then you end up with people doing bad things with that energy. Anyway, so just becoming fascinated with that, and the idea of using an academy to help mature the body, Soma Academy.
Yeah.
From there, yeah.
I like that. So you might have said it, and I just didn't pick up on it. What does Soma mean?
So Soma means body. It's Greek.
Oh, body.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so if you look at like early descriptions of jiu-jitsu, it was one of the earliest forms of physical fitness out there. Even if you go back to, Greek times or whatever, like ancient times, you see the same movements. The human body is locked into certain movements based on the bone structure, and the ligaments. And, that we can still mature ourselves like we did when we were in the hunter-gatherer mode, that we have the ability to, get to that place of calm instead of having that anxiety of like, what do I do with this thing? What are we meant to do? So it all came together with that first school in Oxford, Ohio. Right around 2009 or so is when I started that.
Now, is that when I went to that seminar last year or last spring?
You were close to there.
Close
we were in
to there.
Dayton, which is 30 minutes from there.
Yeah.
Probably.
Okay.
Yes. And so Soma has academies now in Westchester, Dayton.
Yeah. So so it's kind of like a triangle, like almost on the Indiana border is where Oxford is, where Miami University is, Miami of Ohio. So really southwest Ohio. And actually people joke with me all the time. They're like, "Is Soma mean Southern Ohio martial arts?" I'm like, no, but that's really awesome because we'll just pretend.
That's pretty funny.
But so then I met my wife. My sister-in-law is a Spanish professor at Miami, and she introduced me to my wife, my future wife, who's also a Spanish professor. And her family is from the Dayton area. They're originally from the Bronx, so her parents have really thick New York accents, which was kind of fun to discover, especially from coming from Chicago. Like all my relatives have real thick Chicago accents. So getting introduced to her family up there, and then we decided to move up there, and almost immediately I began looking around. There was nothing in the area near where we lived, and so I was like, let's try to open a second location. And I had, at that point, been running, the school in Oxford for about 5 years. And we had never really gotten past about 30, 40 students. It'd just been, and I had gone back to the idea of maybe teaching jiu-jitsu as a job. Maybe that wouldn't work out for me for whatever reason. And it was meant to be. We opened up the Dayton school, and within a year we had about 100 members at that school. Cool. Within a year. And it has just grown like crazy since then. Now it's been 8 years we've been in Dayton. We've gone through 3 different locations. We just upgraded again another 2,000 square feet in August. It just continues to grow. There's just such a need for it in the area.
So then that's a different building than the one I went to.
Yeah, it is.
Cool.
Yeah,
all right. Congrats. That's
thanks.
awesome.
Yeah.
You moved in when? July? So just
July, August. We opened up in August.
Beautiful
building. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'll have to go back.
Oh yeah.
How's the business side of it been for you guys? Has that been as enjoyable as the jiu-jitsu side?
Not at all.
I get it. Yeah, lots to learn.
I don't know. You
I
mentioned that it's a goal to do that as for a living, but I don't think that means the goal is to do business in jiu-jitsu. I mean, that's almost, for me at least, the miserable part.
It
is
is
the fact that you have to do the business side.
Yeah.
You need another black belt on that side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes a while for you to figure that out unless someone has been telling you that from the beginning, and you have like today, if one of my guys were to open a school, it'd be pretty easy
Yeah.
to put them in the,
Because you've gone through
yeah. So there's,
what he needs to go through to learn.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's, like right now I have an assistant that does basically everything but teach the class,
Yeah.
which is what should have been happening all along.
Yeah.
Because, you know, me answering the phone and talking to people and trying to sign them up was not a very good business idea.
Yeah. But necessary in the fact that you have to learn.
It wasn't necessary
Yeah.
in the beginning because I didn't have anyone, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It crisscrosses relationships because you develop such in many ways, intimate relationship with your students, almost a family-like relationship. At least it can happen that way. And then you're doing business with family,
Yeah.
right? So it really helps to have somebody else handle the financial side of things and to separate the business from the relationship you share together on the mats. Just as much as I think it's important to limit what that relationship is on the mats as well. But it's a tricky thing to manage. And this is why I think you see sometimes in our industry people taking advantage of their instructors or their students through that loyalty that you develop. Because through mutual combat, through training together, we develop some pretty strong bonds.
Yeah.
The minute you introduce money into that,
Oh, for sure.
it's a whole new world.
Yeah. We own a fitness gym and a rock climbing gym, and people will come to me for things like their memberships, and my wife's like, nope, you send them to the front desk. Because she knows that oh, no, we'll get you a deal. We'll do. And she's like, nope, send them to the front desk. Exactly. She's smart. She's way smarter than I am.
No deals.
Yeah. Which is then a mutual respect too. Like if I'm giving someone a deal, I'm devaluing the product that I have.
Absolutely.
And if they're wanting a deal, they're also devaluing
and
the
you're
product.
hamstringing their progress.
Yeah.
This has been really difficult for me to learn, and I'm still learning it after 30 years in this business, in this industry. And when you give that deal, you're hamstringing their ability to sacrifice what needs to be sacrificed for that end result. And the minute you do that, you've undermined. And I learned this years ago when I would give scholarships just at request. Hey, you can't afford it right now, great. Every time that student will be gone within 60 days. Every time.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense.
The quickest way to ruin their progress is to give it to them.
Price is only an issue in the absence of value. Mm-hmm. So if it's not valued, it's tough.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, it's cool that you guys have learned that and found that out, because it really does. I mean, what Jiu-Jitsu's done for me in the last 2 years is invaluable. So you can kind of charge whatever you want.
You say we've learned it, but I'm still learning. It's still a struggle every time, every day, and I don't know if I've learned to walk that line right or not. I just know that I think I'm headed the right direction.
Yeah. So you guys all being at the level that you're at, where do you go for guidance now?
Because you've got to separate us here because we're very different levels.
Because you go to them for
sure,
guidance.
Absolutely. So I have many resources that I can turn to, and I think they have a lot more limitations. I'm the newbie at this table for sure.
Well, I'm the newbie.
So I have to fly across the country, to get or fly them here. That kind of input. But there's definitely a difference between a second degree black belt and a fourth and fifth degree black belt, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So where do you guys go? How do you get? What do you do?
But just to go back to Jared's comment, he drove up to, upper Idaho to do, or Montana to do Missoula, Montana to do a lesson with Master Silvio Bering, who was one of the original students of the Gracie Academy, and just flew across the country to do the same thing, and then did a private lesson with Master Silvio Bering while he was there, and there's, that's the thing that I hope to impart on my students, is that when you get to a certain level, you have to find that path to continue your learning, and if you have an instructor, that's awesome. You interact with them, but if they're telling you, hey, you should also seek out this person over here because that's who I seek out, that's exactly what I do, and that's what, Alan taught me, a long time ago. You're going to regret not doing it.
Yeah.
You're not going to regret doing it. That nobody ever regrets putting like, oh man, I wish I hadn't, flown across the country to learn, something that changed the way that I look at this thing. And for me, that, that's, stuff that I was going over in the seminar today were things that I have learned from Master Silvio Bering, from Grandmaster Helson Gracie, like these people that, and I've been out of my house probably the last month and a half attending seminars.
Yeah.
Right. I don't need to go to those seminars to teach jiu-jitsu, but I do need those as a motivation to continue growing, and to find that path to where do we go from here? Like, I'm still trying to chase after Master Sauer. The guy is unbelievable. I remember Alan saying something like, okay, I can see the level he's at black belt when I was like blue or purple. And then when I got to black belt, I couldn't see the level anymore.
Interesting.
Like, it was so far ahead in that time. And all he was doing was training with his students and teaching across the country. Like, he wasn't attending seminars like crazy.
Yeah.
So just his level was jumping just from his interaction with jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
From what I could see.
Yeah.
That from my perspective.
You kind of said today, let a white belt choke you, and you don't know what you're going to get. That might be a positive,
right?
Because you don't know what you're going to get. So
Yeah.
you got to learn to defend against kind of anything.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
Think about when you're teaching a kid to ride a bike or to walk, right? You don't teach a child to walk. You give them a little bit of guidance and keep them from cracking their head open, right? There's this natural ability, I think, that the human body has to learn. And maybe that's what's going on with Master Sauer and with so many others. When you're interacting with jiu-jitsu, you're going to learn. Then when you add into that instruction by grandmasters or very, very high-ranking black belts who have done it for 40, 50, 60 years, who can tweak and correct and interact, man, you just added such an important element, I think, to that learning.
Yeah. Now, you guys have said you're talking Master Sauer. So that's the red belt, correct?
Red and black.
Red and
yeah,
black.
So the coral belt. Yeah.
The coral belt.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes black belt, and is it 5 degrees? And then on the 6th is when you get the 7th. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So after, I kind of understand it on white through brown and certain hours and skill levels. But after that, so you have your 2nd degree black belt, correct?
Correct.
What happens? You get your black belt, and then what do you do from there?
Do you want to answer this?
As far as what? How are you getting
Well,
promoted?
yeah, how are you getting degrees, and then who determines like a coral belt, for example?
Well, basically, and there's 2 or 3 different modes of that based on maybe who your instructor is, or when we were coming up, the system was once you got to be a black belt, if you were teaching and training every 3 years, you would get a stripe. And that was 7th and 8th also. But from 8 to 9 was a 20-year period. Now some of the, like the IBJJF, which is the largest organization, their requirements are now, it's 3, 3, and 3. And then when you go to 4th, that's 5 years from 3 to 4. And then 5 years from 4 to 5. Until, let's see. And then the 7th and 8th are 10 years apart. And then the 8 to 9 is 10 years apart instead of a 20-year gap from the 8 to 9. Still the same time, but there's a belt in between there, so breaks it up just a little.
You could be 10 to 15 years to get a black belt or longer, and then you're 45 to 55 years after that. So it's almost
For a red
sounding
belt.
like
Yeah.
for a red belt.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where you guys have said, you get to that. There's that level between blue belt and black belt, you say, but then once you get to black belt, now the level's kind of infinite.
Yes.
Because it just decades.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of my black belts said something really interesting. He said, "I remember you saying this," and I don't remember saying it, but he said, "You said, no matter what, if you keep training, you're going to be a black belt. It's up to you to decide what kind of black belt you want to be." And that, he said, changed everything that he thought about, because he was thinking, "Oh, okay, my achievements, being tough, tapping people or whatever." Or just the process will take me there. And he's like, "Oh, I got to do some work."
Yeah.
You know, and here's a guy that for the last 15 years has brought me up every single month to teach a seminar for his group every single month. And he has probably never had more than 30 students there. And, you know, 10 people will show up to a seminar. 4 people will show up to a seminar. Sometimes we get 20 people at a seminar. He does a private lesson every single time I come up there. I drive 3 hours there and 3 hours back to you know, continue the relationship with him. But yeah, what kind of black belt do you want to be? You asked me, like, what does it mean to be a black belt?
Yeah.
I think it's different for everybody. Some people it's 10 years, 8 years.
Yeah.
That's what it means to be a black belt. You got to put 8 years. That's all it means to them. Yeah, for me, I want it to be more.
For sure. And has it a little bit changed over the years? I mean, I think James had told me that Alio said, someone asked Alio, why does it take 10 years to get a black belt? And he said, because you can fool me for 9 years. Something along those lines.
Yeah.
5 years.
5 years.
You can fool me for 5, but not for
Okay. Okay. So has it changed a little bit? I mean, in that way, it almost sounds like Alio was saying, you got to kind of prove your worth to me. You got to prove what kind of person you are. Is in some different schools, has that changed a little bit?
I believe so, 100%.
Okay.
But I also think it's not just about that too. Like, you know, he mentioned during the seminar we were talking about when I started. When I started, I didn't even know there was such a thing as a tournament. I just knew these guys were, you know, beating up all these other martial artists, and you know,
Yeah. Well, and they had the challenge fights back then, right?
yeah, and I wanted to be, you know, like the best martial arts guy.
Yeah.
So I didn't really care at that time what martial art it was. I wanted to be the best martial arts guy. So when I started jiu-jitsu, they were, you know, it was about fighting. And so the Vale Tudo and the self-defense, and there was a sport jiu-jitsu part, and that's the part that we did every day, you know, the open mat training, all that kind of stuff. But there's 3 parts to it. And I think, yeah, you could get a black belt quicker. You train in the sport all the time, no problem. I think that happens a lot today because people in the school aren't doing self-defense and they're not doing any Vale Tudo. It's just sport jiu-jitsu. So, yeah, if you're only doing a third of the original thing, it might not take 10 years. So,
Yeah. Now, you guys all focus on kind of at least 2 of them, right? Self-defense and, well, the self-defense portion for sure. But do you kind of still focus on all 3?
not as much.
Not as much.
But in the beginning, when I started, it was a huge focus, and it was a focus for several of the first years that I was there. Almost every class, somebody had boxing gloves on, and people were practicing, you know, taking them down and that type of thing. Every single class, and you know, slowly, kind of over the years, that, you know, got kind of phased out, and more, you know, same with the self-defense. To a point, we were just doing it a little bit and focusing on the ground. And like as far as myself, I took private lessons from Master Silvio on learning all the self-defense, and not privates, but took class from Master Alvaro also, you know, aside from the regular classes for the self-defense part. So,
Because you're now a self-defense, like a law enforcement self-defense teacher as well, right? Something along those lines?
sometimes I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. It's not all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate largely when I come here and there's rubber guns or rubber knives, and that's a part that we incorporate, because I mean, yeah, I want to be good at jiu-jitsu, right? But I want to actually be able to defend myself and my family. So I really appreciate that part.
And I have to say, you know, when I first started, the self-defense I was not interested in that. I just liked the fighting part and the, you know, rolling around. And then I think when I was about maybe, I don't know, probably purple belt, and I was just kind of thinking, I want to be the best jiu-jitsu instructor and best jiu-jitsu person that I can be. And this is a whole system. They have, and some people, oh, those techniques are old. And for me, I always thought, well, who cares? I mean, that's still in the system. And there is, according to Master Helson, there's 82 self-defense techniques. So I figured I'm learning 1,000 techniques on the ground. What's it going to hurt me to learn 82? Just to keep, to keep that curriculum and keep the tradition alive of, just having those moves. So that I know the whole system. And that's, I think it's awesome self-defense too.
Yeah.
But that's more the reason that I started to do it. It's because I wanted to know the whole thing.
Yeah.
So
I like that a lot. And you read back into like the ancient stuff, right? How close is that to what we have nowadays?
I think Alan said it well last night. It's like people nowadays think they're inventing jiu-jitsu moves, and that's to disregard thousands of years of people moving their bodies. Yeah, there might be something that's a little bit different that people do, but you go back and you watch the guy that Elio had the big match against Kimura, right? Masahiko Kimura. And that guy has a video series that was like maybe 1970s or so, and he's doing barambolos through the open guard. What? He's a judo guy. Like, yeah, he's doing barambolos, right? And he doesn't know what a barambolo is because it wasn't to be invented again until 2005 or whatever, or when the Mendez brothers started to do it, and so I don't think there is a invention of jiu-jitsu moves. That would be just stupid. Yeah.
I remember, it's funny. I remember one of the guys that we came up with, Mike Diaz. He came to my school and was doing a little class, and he was like, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna show this thing I've been working on." And I said, "Where did you see it at?" He said, "I just been messing with from half guard. It's this thing." And he started to do it, and like 2 years later, I started hearing about this thing, and I'm like, "What is it? What's the thing I've been hearing about? This barambolo?" And I see somebody do it. I said, "Man, that's what he showed like 2 years ago." He'd never seen it before.
Yeah.
It was just something he was playing with, and then it became a big thing,
Just rediscovering it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's like we had a guy, Jared mentioned, Milda Shabonis. Her dad was as far as modern times, he was he came up with the Von Flue choke. And he actually, I don't know if he did it on him or if he showed it to him in Salt Lake City. But then, he started doing it in UFCs or whatever. And
Von Flue.
Von Flue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now it's the Von Flue choke. It should be the John Shabonis choke.
There was a podcast recently that tied it back to Salt Lake City.
Really?
Finally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to track that down, but I was pretty excited to finally see some credit given there where it came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think, again, the person who's walking around saying they've invented jiu-jitsu moves, but they don't even understand what the term jiu-jitsu means or that it comes from Japan,
Yeah.
It's just, it's severely ignorant. And I think there's a lot to learn from those old textbooks. Like I have books that say Jigoro Kano Jiu-Jitsu, and then they become Jigoro Kano Judo books, and the books all do the same thing, and it's like, oh no, there's always the talk about in Brazil where they're learning judo or jiu-jitsu. That really is irrelevant what term they're using there, but it's the study of movement. It's the study of how to be most efficient in your movements, like whether it's defense or just how to stand correctly. you know?
Yeah. I had read something about judo and jiu-jitsu sometimes just being a translation issue too, when it was translated. But really, when it comes down to it, it's both.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I think Kano's do, right? So ju means soft, pliable, yielding, right? And then jutsu is technique.
Okay.
Right? So jujitsu is just the study of soft, pliable, yielding movements, right? And if you look at skill acquisition in like a dictionary, whatever, it's like maximum efficiency with minimal effort is what skill acquisition is. You can do something without it taking a lot of effort, right? So that's what I see, that like you're learning techniques to the maximum effect, right? The do means way. So you find it in Ken-do, the way of the sword, right? You find it in Taekwondo, the foot fist way, right? You find it in multiple arts, right? He just added his way of yielding soft, pliable techniques, right? It's his way, which is kind of funny because his way is all about the educational benefits of jiu-jitsu, right? And if you look at Grandmaster Elio's, his master text inside there, and just you watch videos of him talking about his desire for jiu-jitsu, it was a way to for people to develop, for people to become better human beings.
Yeah.
Right? Not necessarily even a fighting art, right? It's how to be a better person. And Jigoro Kano was very similar in that. That's why he was calling it judo, the way, right? And I would say judo has moved away from that as the sport has grown larger, the do has shrunk. It's no longer about, look at judo athletes. They become bigger, stronger, faster. They have name brands behind them, right? They are posing for pictures and all about being the center of attention, I don't think that's really what Jigoro Kano was thinking about, and look at what's happening to jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is seeing that same thing within, a very short period of time. Within 100 years, jiu-jitsu will no longer be the art that Grandmaster Elio was trying to teach, and it will be specifically a sport, and it will lose, in my opinion, many of the benefits, if not all the benefits that it had. It'll be well known.
Yeah.
Oh, we all know what jiu-jitsu is. But it'll be, it won't be effective for self-defense because people won't have studied those techniques, and it won't be a fighting art anymore. And it'll be kind of a silly sport. What are these people doing? They're just sitting on their bottoms on the ground, spinning around in circles. It's the things that the jiu-jitsu guys get teased about by like other martial artists, right? Like, oh, jiu-jitsu guys, they scoot around on their butts, or whatever. It's already becoming that because why? They never learned the stand-up part of the art.
Yeah. So you guys are kind of actively almost fighting against that, like keeping the tradition of
Absolutely.
the self-defense.
Well, if you look at Professor Hopkins' patch, right? Velha Garda. How do you pronounce that?
Vela Guarda.
Don't mean to ask questions, but what's the meaning behind that patch? Is that kind of related back to that?
Well, it's just it's basically old guard, but it translates better as the old school. And
Is that because you're old?
it's basically because I'm old. And no, I think it has a lot to do with maybe how I was raised and how I see the world anyway, and how I see jiu-jitsu. And but I'm also I like everyone who does jiu-jitsu. I just do things differently.
Yeah.
And whatever people want to do, I'm 100% okay with that. I'm not trying to, I have my group, and they like what we're doing, and, that's, so I'm not fighting.
Yeah,
to-
yeah.
you know
Well,
what I'm
maybe
saying?
fighting was the wrong word.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Just keeping with tradition.
Yeah,
Just helping uphold that tradition.
Yes.
Yeah, which I appreciate. I love tradition. I think it's awesome to study history like we were talking about earlier and follow some tradition. But it's also fun to see innovation too. I don't know I don't know much about this, but like Eddie Bravo, he's definitely has shifted some stuff, right? So it's kind of fun to see that too, but tradition's awesome, so I appreciate it.
Like Professor Strack mentioned, this idea that it's the yielding art, the yielding technique. It's not very yielding when you want to convince everybody else in the world to do it your way, right?
Right.
So I think it's okay to advocate for how I do it my way, but I have absolutely zero expectation for anybody else to do it the same way.
Yeah.
It's not my concern.
Yeah. Yes. I like that a lot.
There's a really cool video out there with this guy named Ono, Suntane Ono, and he was a jiu-jitsu instructor at Jigoro's Kano's at the Kodokan, right? Even when it was judo, he was still kind of doing jiu-jitsu, and he was specifically like a newaza ground master, right? And you can find these videos. They're really kind of, they're not good quality anymore, but from like the 1950s. He's maybe 70 years old, 1950s, and he's doing Eddie Bravo's lockdown, deep half guard, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and so...
That's cool.
I would imagine you become so proficient in the thing that you have some freedom to play.
Yeah.
And I think that understanding is important, that you don't have the freedom to play until you can defend yourself, until you can do some things. Yeah. And I think people skip that now. I hear the rhetoric, and don't get me wrong, like I'm a fan of footlocks. Any submission that I can do that, I can do it effectively and make my partner stop without hurting them is awesome, but that rhetoric of why bother passing the guard when you can just footlock somebody? Well, you kind of miss the whole point of what we do then, because the goal of passing the guard is to control the upper body of somebody, right? Yeah. And it's like, well, that idea of why ignore 50% of the body? John Donhurst says that, Dean Lister says that, and it's really caused like an explosion into the study of the leg lock game. It's really important that you study the upper body. It's really important that you go back and that you do that study, and you can play with that stuff too, whatever. But you control somebody by controlling their upper body. You look at Eddie Bravo's combat jiu-jitsu, right? You seen how many footlocks and heel hooks are going on in that?
It's a lot less.
It is a lot less.
Because they're getting hit?
They're getting open palm strike to the face and getting knocked out.
Yeah.
And so those guys are like, hey, what do you do when somebody's standing above you and they're trying to throw punches at you? And it's like, oh, that's what the white belts learn in Jiu-Jitsu 101, in an academy that has self-defense, or has Vale Tudo, right? Like, so it's just, it's cyclical. It's I really believe that it'll come back around, that you'll have the Jiu-Jitsu guy enter the UFC with no striking ability, and he will take every single guy to the ground when they want to box with them, and he'll submit the guy, and everyone will be like, have you heard about this thing? It's jiu-jitsu. It works, and maybe it's called something different at that point. Maybe it's not even called Brazilian jiu-jitsu. It's some new hybrid of the guy just clinches, takes the guy to the ground and submits him, but that's what I see. I see it just going full circle over and over, because we seem to just forget. We don't learn from history. We just keep trying to find something new. You can't just be satisfied that it works.
Well, the mastery part is what intrigues me. It might be fun to learn some leg locks, but that's not mastery. Mastery is learning the upper body and the lower, and all of it. So
and and listening to the advice of people, of previous centuries, or like previous decades, that are saying, man, if you want to be able to use your knees in later life, like we're all kind of figuring this out. I'm 46, going to 47. I can't do the things I did when I was 37. I'm starting to feel some of the damage that happened in the first few years I did jiu-jitsu. I'm starting to feel some of that damage from the first few years, right? Imagine if your first few years of damage is ACL tears, MCL tears, meniscus tears, your ankles getting popped, those are the damage. Well, I'm sorry to say, I'm worried. I'm worried those guys are going to be able to walk when they're older.
Yeah.
Like my back hurts, my neck hurts, my elbows hurt, my shoulders hurt from getting cranked on, from people doing upper body controls on me, and me going really, really hard when I first started, not understanding how to, how best to train for longevity, despite having an instructor who's saying, look, we need to train for longevity.
Yeah.
You need to not go that hard.
Every day.
Saying, every day, saying like, tough guys fall from trees in Brazil. They're everywhere. There's tough guys everywhere. And then saying to me like, Matt Strack, you're a tough guy. It's like, oh, dang,
Yeah.
But, like that is something that I don't want to say I told you so in another 10 years or 20 years when those guys are like, man, I can't do anything anymore. My knees are shot. My feet are shot. It's like, we knew that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate people like you guys that are reminding us constantly, like, hey, roll soft.
And it's all cool. Yeah. Like he was saying, like, I don't fault anybody for the style of jiu-jitsu they choose, to whatever keeps them in it. And for the most part, it's a healthy endeavor for a lot of people. It takes them away from much more unhealthy, things. So, I think whatever keeps you at it. But I think there's a lot of people that have a misunderstanding now of what jiu-jitsu is. Yeah. And then unfortunately they maybe feel cheated at some point if something happens and they're like, man, I wasn't able to defend myself against somebody who didn't, doesn't really know a whole lot,
Yeah.
That's a little my worry, that eventually it affects the viewpoint of jiu-jitsu and that it becomes ineffective,
Well, keep pushing tradition. I mean, that's, because we could try to, like, I used the improper terminology earlier about fighting against, but if you advocate for tradition, I think that's probably the best way to keep the tradition going. And then you're going to attract people like me that likes the tradition. And then I try to evangelize it to everybody else. And, so I don't want to keep more of your time. I really appreciate your guys' time today. I know your time is very valuable, and, I know our listeners will get a lot out of it. They're from all walks of life, so if we can just add a few people to going to jiu-jitsu, that's the important part.
Yeah,
awesome. But the name of the podcast is 2 Lessons Learned, and I'm not a great interviewer, so I don't know how to suck the question in to be very specific. So if we can just go quickly through Professor Strack and Professor Hopkins, and also you, Jared. And when do we start calling you Professor? When does that happen? Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Just 2 lessons that. Oh, sorry. Third
degree.
Third degree. Cool.
That's what we came up with.
Yeah. Cool.
That's what, not what we came up with, but that's when we were coming up through the ranks.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I was told.
Well, I look forward to that day. So, just 2 lessons that you've learned, maybe the biggest lessons in jiu-jitsu that you've been able to apply to your life.
I think, my own experience, I got into jiu-jitsu because I didn't believe in martial arts, and somebody, just because of the commercialization of it, not that all martial arts were like that, but my experience was, hey, there's a kid in school who's a black belt in Taekwondo. And then the high school bully just beat him to a pulp. But he's a black belt. What, wasn't he just supposed to be able to do something to the bully? Like, couldn't do a thing, right? And that was my experience, was I thought they were supposed to be able to defend themselves at the least, if not put on some kind of fantastic show. Yeah. Like, here he goes, the black belt. And he just got beat up by the bully that doesn't know anything at all, other than he's just aggressive, So I had been working a job after high school at an all-night manufacturing plant making plastic disposable containers for needles and stuff in hospitals, sharps disposables. And one of the guys that I worked with, I went to high school with, and he had a black belt magazine, and he was all inundated with it. This is 1997. I hadn't watched the UFCs at this point. He was into everything new, had seen everything. Oh man, look, there's a jiu-jitsu school opening up in McHenry, Illinois. Jeff Curran, Peter Sauer Jiu-Jitsu, and I was like, I have no interest in any of that. I saw what happened to the kid in high school. Multiple kids that were kung fu masters, right? They're 16 years old, they're master so-and-so and their art, whatever. No, I don't want to go. Oh, come on, you got to go check this thing out. All right, I'll go. So I went up there.
Did you recognize Jeff's name? Or
No.
did you- okay.
No.
But you went to high school with him.
I went to high school, yeah. Yeah, we went to high school as well. Yeah, I didn't know the guy at all.
Okay.
So I went to this place, and we're all going to meet up there and go this thing. I didn't want to be there, right? Keep that in mind. So I go there, and my friends blow me off. The guy who's trying to convince me to go doesn't show up. And so I sit there outside of my car. You know, I'm 19 years old. You know, like I wouldn't have a problem walking into a place, but I was intimidated, like a little bit, regardless of my thought of like martial arts don't work. I'm like, I don't just want to storm into this place. Who knows what's going on in there? So I'm kind of looking in through the window, sitting in my car, and I probably watched the whole lesson. And then, you know, I was like, man, it's kind of interesting. It's like different, you know, they're on top of each other and like grappling or whatever. It looks like wrestling. So I went back to work the next day and yelled at the guy. I was like, man, you convinced me to do this thing, and then you don't even show up. And so I got him, and I got together a group of people like my brother and a couple of our friends, and we all went in there together, you know. And I remember seeing the guy. I recognized him as soon as I walked in the door, Jeff Curran. I was thinking, oh, I know him from high school. Like, I'll take this guy in a second, you know. Like, I'm bigger than him, you know. Like, I was pretty athletic in high school, and I was thinking, like, this is not going to be a problem at all. You know, and he's teaching these moves, showing like the Americana, you know, and I'm thinking, you're not going to get that against me, you know. Just like every guy in the UFC who's like, you know, I'm not going to get taken down by boys, you know. And then we proceed to get to the open mat. And, you know, I just recently heard Henry Gracie talking about this, how a beginner student should never be introduced to jiu-jitsu in the way that I was introduced to jiu-jitsu, which is, I tried to stop him from doing all of the jiu-jitsu that he knew, and he continued to tap me out over and over and over and let me go every time I tapped. And that was why I decided to continue doing jiu-jitsu, because I was sold.
Yeah.
Like, I tried as hard. I was physically exhausted and a little humiliated, you know, thinking like, man, I thought I could take this guy. You know, like, he would have murdered me if I had gotten in a fight with him, you know. And I think that's really important, you know. I think ultimately my point here is that what I expected out of jiu-jitsu was to be like that, you know, to be able to do it against somebody who's trying to stop you from doing it, and that ultimately it's become something else. You know, like I still enjoy that part. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. Like I like the fact that it's so effective. But now I think, like you were talking about the thousands of people that you interact with. Like, I don't personally like Facebook. I try not to post anything on there other than maybe some motivational stuff.
Yeah,
right?
You're smart.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to argue with somebody across the country or whatever about something that's silly. You know, like, let's have a conversation in person, you know. But I've had people on Facebook say, man, 10 years ago you said something in a class and it changed the way that I thought. And that is why I do jiu-jitsu now. Yeah. You know, and not just for that side of things. People say things to me that, you know, and maybe it takes me 10 years to be like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But that, you know, it can be a vehicle for changing the way that you think about the world. You know, I think that is a lesson for me, that, you know, what brought me in isn't why I do it. Yeah. You know, it's still a part of it. I still like that part. Yeah. You know, I still like a white belt that's feisty and wants to try to take my head off, and I like that, you know.
Give them a lesson, wrap them up.
Yeah. But hopefully I can do it in a way where they, you know, think about jiu-jitsu differently.
For sure.
You know.
Yeah, a good lesson, you know, a nice lesson.
Yeah.
The gentle art lesson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I like that you've let that change over the years and have kind of molded it into maybe the more mature teacher and professor that you are, to, you know, to let that change. Yeah. So good job. Thank you. Yeah. Appreciate that.
And I think if you're going to ask a second, you know, thing that I've learned, and it's like, I had a little kid come up to me a couple months ago. He said, just like little short kid named Jorge. And he said, Professor, can I ask you something? And I said, sure. And so I got down on my knees, talked to him. He said, why do you do jujitsu? And I was like, I don't know what to say to this kid. And he goes, is it because you want to help people? Mm-hmm. And I thought, man, I was like, you took the words away from me. Like, that's the best answer is, that's one thing I've learned about myself is unless you're helping people, I don't think you can be truly happy, And so, yeah, that lesson right there, like learning how to help people, like, man, that is not something I expected out of myself. Coming out of high school, I didn't know where I was going to be, what I was going to do, but yeah.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
And good job getting to that conclusion. I believe there's many people, walking around that maybe have not come to that conclusion. Hopefully they will. But when you can learn what happiness is, it sure helps life.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that your brother and sister-in-law let you follow them around. I'm really glad that happened.
They've moved again. I don't know what that.
Well, and for more reasons than one. Because of them, you met your wife.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we have 2 great kids.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's great. Yeah. What about you, Professor Hopkins?
I have to follow that.
Yeah, it's a hard one to follow.
It is.
Well, I was trying to give you time to think.
Oh, well, that's the worst thing you can do. I mean, honestly, I would have to say, the helping people part. Although I would deny that a little bit. If someone asked, I don't want to try to be like a nice guy or anything.
Yeah, you got to save face a little bit, and you have a reputation. To, No, I'm just kidding.
But I think with all honesty, when I started, I was not interested in that at all. Like I said earlier, I always thought it was cool that the tough guy was nice. But I didn't really think about it as helping people. That was just for me. And when I first started martial arts, and even when I started jiu-jitsu, that's all I thought about it as. And, later on, that kind of, I think if you continue, that's just going to happen naturally. I don't think, there are some people, they say you have to leave the ego at the door and all that kind of stuff, and which I've never really seen that to be true in jiu-jitsu. I think, you have naturally nice guys, and you have, jiu-jitsu just kind of brings that out. I think sometimes people are, obnoxious or full of themselves. It makes them more obnoxious and full of themselves. And unfortunately, you see that in a lot of, jiu-jitsu guys I see kind of promoting themselves all the time. Not their rank, but just them.
Yeah.
Talk about how great they are, and which is kind of weird, But I think probably helping people is probably the main thing. And also, I would like to, one thing coming up has kind of confused me about, like he said, he went to the class and got tuned up, which, the first time that I did it, the first person that I ever trained with was Grandmaster Horian Gracie. Was the first guy that I ever, had a match with.
Yeah.
Which, was pretty funny. I was a black belt in, other martial arts, and it wasn't the fact that he was, beating me, because, I wasn't anything great or anything, but so it wasn't the fact that he was beating me. It was the fact that he was basically doing it so easily. He's telling me jokes, while he was doing it, and he was actually he would get me in a technique, and he was actually reaching back and patting himself on the back, and you know, and he would say, "Good move, Jorge," like that, you know, pat himself, and which is pretty funny, you know. And I have my student there who, you know, I was beating up on a regular basis. He was just over there laughing, you know. He thought it was great, and but I thought it was great too, and you know, like he said, he didn't get discouraged. It's like, man, that guy just beat me easily. Why wouldn't I want to do that? So I've never understood the discouraging part about that. Like, you go to the school, the guys beat you, and then people don't come back because they got beat. It's like, would they have come back if they would have won? You know, that doesn't make sense either. But anyway, yeah, the guy, you know, beat me super easy. And I remember, you know, at one point during this, I said, man, how long does it take to get a black belt? And he said, 10 years minimum. And my only thought was, wow, that's it? Only 10? Man, to get like that? That's what I was thinking, like, wow. You know, I think at the time, he was a 5th degree at the time.
Yeah.
You know, but I remember just thinking, wow, only 10 years? You know, because I'd already put in that in what I was doing. And, you know, like I said, the guy's telling jokes while he's, you know, tuning me up. And everybody else, you know, he did the same. But it was funny.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I forgot the question, but
Oh, no, I love that. The story is great. And so you've never had a problem with instant gratification. You've always been okay with delayed.
no, I knew. I just thought, like, I mean, to me, it's like obvious. You're starting something new. You're doing something. You're not going to be good at it.
Yeah.
And so I've never, you know, he was talking about people should not be introduced to it like that. And I have mixed feelings about that because, you know, why not? Why shouldn't they be? The guy's coming in there. Now, maybe not the first night, you know, but I don't know. I don't think, you know, you shouldn't have to wait 6 months or whatever it is that, you know, people think that you should have to wait. I mean, you come in there to, you know, do jiu-jitsu, you should experience it. And I think, I don't know, this is just me talking. I think when guys are training, one guy's winning and one guy's losing. That's what I think. I don't think, you know, should be this discussing things and, you know, while you're, I don't know, just, yeah, you're getting beat, tough. That's what happens. You're getting beat.
Yeah.
There's other people you're going to beat. And then, you know, it's all going to work itself out after. Like we had a guy in Salt Lake who, well, you can say he was like a prodigy type guy. Maybe. I mean, to me, he's one of the best I've ever seen. And I remember another friend of ours was saying, we were just kind of talking about one day because I think we were all purple belts, and everybody's like, man, that guy's so amazing, you know. And my friend was like, yeah, but, you know, I think the more that we keep going, we're all going to end up at the same spot. Like, we all get black belts, and we're all going to be, you know, because maybe that growth that he's experiencing right now, he's going to kind of slow, and then we're going to grow a little bit, and he may go a little more, and then we'll all go, and we're all going to be at the same place sooner or later. We're all going to have, you know, the same type of thing. Anyway.
No, I want to go back and talk about something really quickly, and it's like, you can delay the losing, right? But I know that resilience from jiu-jitsu, like the way that I deal with loss is very different than the way people who don't do jiu-jitsu deal with loss. I am a big fan of that Jocko video, that good.
Oh yeah. So
You know, I
so
mean,
good.
that's jujitsu right
Yeah.
there. Like, you just got tapped out 40 times in a night.
Good.
Good.
You know, like,
Yeah.
for real.
Yep.
And if you want to delay that, like he's talking about, you want to delay it. Cool. When are you going to learn about the loss that comes with
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu? Oh man, you can do jiu-jitsu without ever having that. Well, then you lose that thing. That's the thing. Like, when people come to me, did you hear? You know, they're going to shut down the world for the COVID. And, good.
Yeah.
All right, what are we going to do now? Like, we're going to do jiu-jitsu, Zoom jiu-jitsu. You know, like,
Jiu-jitsu.
like, who knew?
Yeah.
Right? And then as a result, I got people that would have never done jiu-jitsu doing jiu-jitsu. Their spouse started jiu-jitsu. Their kids started jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that's
You know, people watched those videos. We connected with people across the world during that time. People reevaluated their lives. Like, you're going to cry about that? You know, like, oh, nothing bad can ever happen. That's the problem, right? So now you're going to take jiu-jitsu and you're going to make it acceptable for every single person. Doesn't matter your walk of life. You can come in and you can do it without ever having that loss. Is that good? I don't know.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that. I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you guys. What about you?
Is it my turn?
It's your turn.
It's hard to piggyback off.
I know. Well, and it's a tough question. It's so broad, so you can take it wherever you want it.
As long as, you know, it's not the only two lessons that I've learned.
sure.
But I went in with a much, I think, more negative attitude toward jiu-jitsu when I started than these guys did. I wanted to go in because I wanted to do what Hoist was doing to people in the UFC. But I was convinced that I was going to go in and figure out how to beat jiu-jitsu. I wasn't there as a humble student to learn what jiu-jitsu was. It was, well, there must be something here, some gimmick, some trick that they're using that's allowing him to dominate like that. And I found out pretty quick that that wasn't a gimmick. And so I think the first thing that it did was put a mirror in front of my face that I had never had put there before. I had to learn that, look, I'm not going to ever catch these two guys in my technique. I may be where they are someday, but they're going to be decades ahead of me at that point. So I had to learn to be content that there are people who beat you now and will beat you till the day you're buried. And that's an interesting concept when in so many martial arts, the idea is I have to be the absolute best or I'm not a valid instructor or a valid person, you know. And so I think that was probably the first. When I went and made that transition from, you know, I want to figure out how to beat these jiu-jitsu guys that are doing so awesome in these no-hold-barred fights, to, wait a minute, this is transforming my life. This is changing who I am. I'm a better husband because I do jiu-jitsu. I'm a better father. I was a better school teacher because I trained jiu-jitsu. So many things it was changing. That was huge. And then I think the second thing, you know, I've always had faith in God. I don't have faith in my fellow man. And in the social media age that's come since I started doing jiu-jitsu has made that worse. I always struggle to see the best in people around me. And what jiu-jitsu did was restore, in so many ways, that faith in humanity. Because we come in here, look, you walk into this academy, you see 40 men and women trying to choke, arm lock, throw, slam, control each other, and not one person will lose their temper. You're going to see smiles, and you're going to see, you know, just ear-to-ear grins and brotherhood and sisterhood and a kind of harmony that you don't see almost anywhere else in the world. And yet you go to a basketball game at the local church for 5 minutes, you're going to see 3 fist fights, right? And so I think what I really gained that second lesson is to be able to look at people and see that, look, the world's not as bad as we think it is. You spend your time on Facebook, you're going to absolutely lose your faith in humanity and think that it's a nasty world. You come train on the mats for an hour, and you go home believing, nah, man, this is a pretty good place. There are some really, really good people out there. And so my wife jokes that when she sees me getting a little stressed, down, go to class. Go train for 2 hours. She knows I'm going to come back going, nah, man, this world's beautiful. It's a beautiful life, you know. So now if I can just finish both of those, if I can learn to always stay humble, you know, I still struggle with pride and ego so much. and also with keeping my faith in humanity. And that's why I'm going to train forever.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to train till I die, because that's what it's teaching me. I still haven't figured out the secret to beat jiu-jitsu. I don't think there is one. and I have so much more to learn. But if I'm learning those two things, I think I'm doing fine.
Yeah, and that bigger picture. It's cool that you were able to come into it wanting to beat jiu-jitsu, and then all of a sudden you found this bigger picture that if you can't get enough of it,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
It's a huge wake-up call.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Really appreciate your time.
I got one more thing.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Just real quick. You asked earlier, and I don't think either one of us answered actually, but about you know, where we get information from,
Yeah.
type of thing, which is a lot of places. But I had and I'm just going to tell you this one thing, because I had a student ask me a while back. He's like, "Man, you have these, you know, you're always going to seminars. You always bring people in, or, you know, I always have Master Hoist coming every year. He comes, you know, and so one of the guys said, "Oh yeah, you know, you bring in Master Hoist. That's really cool, you know." He said, "You know, do you get anything out of that or whatever?" I said, "Look, I'm a 4th degree. When I started jiu-jitsu 30-some years ago, Hoist was a 4th degree. So that's pretty interesting. Like, the guy was a 4th degree when I started. So yeah,
Yeah.
I get quite a bit out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he knows, you know, he knows a thing or two about jiu-jitsu. So
That's good perspective.
yeah,
Yeah, I love that. Thank you guys so much. Like, truly appreciate your time. Thank you for coming out here to Idaho.
thank you.
Learn some awesome stuff. I have to now go and start writing it down because I'll forget it. And we did a private lesson. It was either this time last year or 6 months ago. I don't know. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And I voice recorded it into my phone as soon as I left.
Nice.
This was great. And it was, you know, maybe 8 or 9 minutes of talking. Still listen to it every once in a while. And so thank you for that. If you guys ever need anything, let me know. I would say I'd show you around Jackson and Yellowstone and everything, but you got a great guide right here. So, yeah, thank you guys. Is there any way, I know you guys don't have much of a social media presence, which I actually really appreciate, by the way. I think that's really cool. But I do want people to know where your schools are and how they can reach out to you guys if, you know, if they need to or if they want to. So,
Yeah.
Professor Strack, where can they find you?
You can find me on Facebook just under my name, Matt Strack, and also on Instagram, I think.
Okay.
And then the academy is Soma Academy. It's also on Facebook and Instagram as well. We have a YouTube page with techniques on there. And then our website, somajj.com. So somajujitsu.com. But
All
yeah,
right.
I try to do my best to be at least, you know, a little present on social media, but, you know, not there too much.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's probably linked with your happiness.
Yeah.
So good job. Good job there.
And I'm on Facebook. It's probably my website. I think my website is on there too. On you know, in the little about section.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what my website is, to be honest.
Oh, no.
Team Hopkins, BJJ.
I don't think
No?
it's BJJ.
I thought it was just teamhopkins.com. Does that sound
I think
right?
it's something like that.
Cool.
There might
When I
be
stalk
there
you,
might be a
that's where-
JJ. There might be a jiu-jitsu on there, but it's on the accurate one is on the Facebook.
Okay. And they could probably type it into Google, Alan Hopkins, Jiu-Jitsu, and maybe
Yes.
find that. Okay.
Yes.
And Facebook, and then they go to the About page and figure it out there.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And I'm on the Soma Jiu-Jitsu website. That's the best way to
Perfect.
find me. SomaJJ.com.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a
Thanks.
good day. Thanks.
Thanks.